Lakers security went into full panic mode, desperately trying to erase the footage, but it was already circulating and spreading rapidly across the internet. Despite their efforts, the video could not be contained, and the situation quickly gained widespread attention. Reports suggest that Shaquille O'Neal confronted LeBron James in the tunnel immediately after the Lakers' embarrassing loss to the Knicks. The intense encounter nearly escalated into a full-blown scene, catching everyone off guard and creating a moment no one was prepared to witness.
Because the game is different. Like, I want people to understand, and our fans to understand, that playing 82 games in the 80s and 90s is not the same as playing 82 games in the 2020s.
According to insiders and eyewitnesses, the confrontation erupted quickly and with overwhelming intensity. By the time the final buzzer sounded, Shaquille O'Neal was already stationed in the tunnel, blocking the path to the locker room like an immovable wall. His presence alone was enough to stop the entire Lakers group in their tracks. Rob Pelinka appeared visibly shaken, scrambling to keep distance between the two superstars as tension filled the narrow corridor. In that moment, it finally sank in for LeBron James that his recent podcast comments had done more than trend online. They had ignited a fire in one of the few figures powerful and respected enough to openly challenge his legacy. When Shaq delivered his pointed question, the mood instantly shifted. Insiders claim that this exchange shook LeBron's inner circle and marked a turning point, with whispers already suggesting this could be the beginning of the end of his untouchable public image. What was meant to be a night celebrating greatness instead became a scene of public unraveling under the bright lights. On February 1, 2026, at Madison Square Garden, the Lakers fell 112-100 to the Knicks in a game that felt more lopsided than the score suggested. OG Anunoby and Landry Shamet carved through the defense with ease, while Luka Doncic calmly dropped 30 points. LeBron finished with 22, but at 41 years old, he appeared slower than fans were accustomed to seeing. As he entered the tunnel after the game, likely already thinking about breaking it down on his podcast, he was met by Shaq, leaning against the concrete like he owned the building. This was not a playful television moment. It was raw, old-school intensity that instantly shifted the atmosphere. Witnesses say the tension became electric. Shaq stared LeBron down and bluntly challenged him, questioning how he could claim today's game is harder when even extended eye contact now results in a technical foul. The tunnel fell silent. LeBron attempted to explain, citing pace, space, and the speed of the modern game, but Shaq cut him off. He fired back, arguing that pace means nothing when players are protected from contact, and accusing LeBron of hiding behind speed to avoid acknowledging that his body is no longer what it once was in what Shaq called a soft era. The exchange escalated further when Shaq referenced stars like Anthony Davis and Joel Embiid, pointing out how frequently modern players miss games for minor injuries. He contrasted this with his era, when players stayed on the court regardless of pain. According to those present, Shaq labeled LeBron's podcast comments as delusional, forcing staff members to step in before the confrontation turned physical. Executives and team personnel rushed to separate them, stunned as the dramatic scene unfolded before their eyes. What makes the situation even more striking is how statistical comparisons appear to support Shaq's argument. The physicality and pace of basketball in the 1980s and 1990s paint a picture of a far more demanding environment. Shaq, who entered the league in 1992, experienced firsthand the bruising nature of that era, one marked by relentless contact, strict defense, and minimal protection for offensive players. Over time, he witnessed the league evolve toward a perimeter-focused, spacing-driven style, with stricter foul rules and increased emphasis on player safety. Shaq argues that the idea of today's game being faster does not hold up under scrutiny. In the mid-1980s, league pace regularly hovered around 102 possessions per game, with some teams pushing as high as 107. In contrast, the 2026 season sits closer to 99.5, actually slower than many years in the past. Meanwhile, players of earlier eras endured constant physical punishment without modern medical resources or recovery technology. LeBron, by contrast, reportedly spends over $1 million annually on body maintenance, utilizing cutting-edge recovery tools, private travel, and elite training staff. While his longevity is remarkable, Shaq has publicly stated that it is largely a product of modern advantages and a less punishing style of play. In his view, surviving and thriving in today's NBA is fundamentally different from enduring the relentless physical battles of previous generations, a belief that finally exploded into open confrontation in that tense Madison Square Garden tunnel.
It's less physical, And he's always done this his whole career. He never really done that. So, but the fact that it's less physical, I think it definitely helps him.
That quote made waves for a reason. From Shaq's perspective, if today's stars were forced to endure nightly battles against physical defenders like Rick Mahorn, along with exhausting travel schedules and the absence of luxury recovery setups, their careers might look very different. The grind of that era demanded relentless toughness, and few players escaped without lasting wear and tear. Even Michael Jordan weighed in on the debate back in June 2025, questioning the competitive edge of the modern game. He spoke about missing the days when players took pride in showing up every night, regardless of pain or fatigue, and believed that this mentality was a defining trait of greatness in his generation.
That type of competition, that type of competitiveness is what I live for, and I miss it. I miss that aspect of playing the game of basketball.
Michael Jordan played all 82 games in 9 different seasons, setting a standard of durability and commitment that became legendary. Kobe Bryant carried that same mindset, famously pushing through a broken finger and continuing to compete at the highest level. That relentless toughness is what built their legacies and defined an era when playing through pain was seen as a badge of honor. Today, teams take a far more cautious approach. If a knee feels tight or a hamstring needs rest, players are often sidelined as sports science emphasizes long-term health and career longevity. While this method may extend playing careers, many old-school players argue that it weakens the mental and physical toughness that once defined greatness. This fundamental clash of philosophies is why the debate continues to flare up, and it also explains why Shaq's Netflix Power Moves ranking earlier this year felt personal. When asked to name his top 10 players, he placed Michael Jordan at number 1, Kobe Bryant at number 2, and slotted LeBron James at 3rd.
Number 3, I'm going to go with the King, LeBron James. Number 2, I'm going with, rest in peace, Kobe Bean Bryant. And number 1, the greatest player of all time, is Michael Jordan.
For Shaq, the message was clear. It all comes down to killer instinct. Michael Jordan never needed a podcast to explain how hard the game was. He proved it by dominating anyone who stood in his way. When LeBron talks about speed and evolution, critics like Paul Pierce push back forcefully, arguing that the numbers simply do not support that narrative. But the real reason Shaq exploded in that tunnel goes far deeper than statistics or rankings. For the legends who helped build the league's identity, respect is everything. In Shaq's view, LeBron is missing one crucial element that cannot be bought, trained, or measured: the fear factor. It is that intangible edge that makes opponents uneasy even before the opening tip. Shaq has been repeating this argument throughout 2025 and 2026, and in that tunnel, it finally reached a breaking point. In that moment, he bluntly told the world that nobody was truly afraid of LeBron.
I didn't think players really feared LeBron like they did Jordan.
I've never really heard any players say they fear LeBron.
That single line shook the internet because, when it comes to LeBron, people unquestionably respect the numbers, the records, and the championships. Those achievements are undeniable. But fear is a different conversation altogether. Opponents were not lying awake the night before facing him, dreading what was about to happen. They were not staring at the ceiling, thinking the next game would be a nightmare. When players faced Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant, it felt different. They knew those two were coming to take everything from them. It was not just about losing. It was about being embarrassed on national television and having your confidence shattered in front of a packed arena. That ruthless, warrior-like mentality defined their dominance. The league today carries a very different energy. It has shifted from that cold-blooded competitive mindset to a more relaxed, friendly, podcast-era vibe. LeBron appears on shows with players like Tyrese Halliburton, laughing, joking, and chatting as if it is summer break. There is nothing wrong with building connections, but it stands in sharp contrast to the hard edge of the 1990s. That is why Shaq's ranking felt so final. Michael Jordan at number 1, Kobe Bryant at number 2, and LeBron James at number 3, with no hesitation in his tone. Shaq played alongside Kobe and competed against Jordan. He witnessed that killer instinct firsthand, and his message was simple. If you need one basket to save your life, you call the Mamba, not someone balancing greatness with brand deals and podcast microphones at 41 years old. Anyone who thinks the 1990s were slow or unskilled only needs to watch the 1989 Pistons vs. Bulls series. Players like Bill Laimbeer, Rick Mahorn, and Charles Oakley delivered relentless physical defense. Driving to the rim meant hitting the floor. That was normal and expected. Larry Bird absorbed hits that would dominate headlines today, yet he returned the next game ready to compete. There were no endless debates over suspensions or constant replay reviews, just tough basketball with pride on the line. Against that backdrop, LeBron's recent podcast comment, "Calf injuries are the new high ankle sprains," only fueled the growing debate.
I think when I first came into the league, Reese, some of the biggest concerns of injuries was like, a high ankle sprain. You was afraid to step on somebody's ankle because there was 4 or 5 guys sitting in the paint. Because it was 4 or 5 guys sitting in the paint. And if you land on somebody's ankle, you get a high ankle sprain, you out 4 to 6 weeks. Now, that's not really much you don't really see that as much now because the game is so spread open, it's so much pace. But now you see the new high ankle sprain is the calf.
He argued that the speed of today's game makes minor injuries feel just as serious as the major ones players endured decades ago. That take did not sit well with the old guard. Shaq spent years absorbing brutal contact in the paint, and Isaiah Thomas famously played through a severely injured ankle during the 1988 finals, still managing to score 25 points in a single quarter. Moments like that are etched into NBA history. So when LeBron frames the modern era as harder because of pace and movement, critics hear it as an attempt to rewrite the true struggle of earlier generations. LeBron also suggested that in the 1980s, players would simply camp in the paint like statues, a comment that struck a nerve. Names like Hakeem Olajuwon, David Robinson, Patrick Ewing, and a young Shaq immediately come to mind, players who were anything but slow or passive. They were elite athletes capable of running the floor, defending at a high level, and dominating on both ends. Adding to that perspective, Shaq was recently asked by NBC News to name his all-time starting 5. Without hesitation, he selected Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, Karl Malone, Larry Bird, and Hakeem Olajuwon, reinforcing his respect for the greatness and toughness of that era.
So if you had to do your all-time NBA starting 5, do you have one?
Kobe and Mike.
Okay.
That's the 1 and the 2. The 3, I gotta go with Bird.
Okay.
4, I gotta go with Malone. And 5, I gotta go with Hakeem.
You left somebody out.
No.
Shaq did not include LeBron in his all-time starting 5, and he did not even place himself in the lineup, which showed just how seriously he takes his rankings. When the interviewer mentioned LeBron, Shaq barely reacted. The message was unmistakable. If he were building a team to win everything, he would choose players fully committed to dominance, not those focused on media narratives or podcast moments. That is how he views greatness. Shaq is not alone in that mindset. Paul Pierce reacted strongly to those same comments on his show No Fouls Given. He was visibly fired up. When Danny Green tried to defend the modern style of play, Pierce cut him off and argued that today's emphasis on speed looks different because defenders are no longer allowed to be physical. He pointed out that in the 2000s, players had to fight through screens, absorb contact, and truly battle on defense, while today switching assignments and limited physicality are labeled as advanced defense. Pierce also reminded viewers that in earlier eras, careless drives to the basket came with consequences. Defenders like Ben Wallace and Kevin Garnett were waiting at the rim, ready to deliver punishing contact. There was a real price for attacking recklessly. And given Pierce's history with LeBron, dating back to their fierce 2008 Eastern Conference semifinal battle, when both players scored 40 points in a dramatic Game 7, his criticism carries personal weight. That rivalry was intense, built on pride, grit, and relentless competition. This is why Shaq's tunnel confrontation and Pierce's televised criticism represent more than a reaction to a single podcast comment. It is a clash of eras, identities, and values. In the 1990s and early 2000s, the league was fueled by raw competitiveness. Rivalries were deep, trash talk was constant, and every matchup felt personal. Pierce still remembers that LeBron had to form a super team in Miami to finally overcome him, and in his eyes, that history still matters. Pierce believes LeBron's claim that the game is harder today is not random but carefully timed. In 2026, as younger stars begin to outpace him, LeBron frames the modern era as tougher than ever. To Pierce, this sounds strategic, an attempt to protect legacy as age sets in. He doubled down by criticizing modern defensive switching, calling it a shortcut that allows stars to avoid accountability. In his era, guarding a superstar meant committing to the challenge all night, fighting through screens, enduring contact, and earning every stop. Today, players simply call for a switch and shift the responsibility elsewhere, a change Pierce sees as symbolic of how the game has softened.
Yeah, mentally
so
it is.
many times I'm bruised up after the game. My shoulder hurts.
It's definitely more physical.
It's hurting.
So why were more guys playing 75 games a year then?
Because it was tougher. Well, now you're switching everything.
That is Pierce's core issue. He told Danny Green directly that today's historic numbers exist largely because the old-school enforcer has nearly disappeared from the game. The league no longer allows that physical edge. If someone tried to play like Charles Oakley or Rick Mahorn in 2026, they would likely be suspended before the holidays. In Pierce's view, the rules and officiating have reshaped the game into something far less punishing, making modern offensive production look inflated. Then came a moment that stunned nearly everyone. On January 29th, for the first time in 21 years, LeBron James was not named an All-Star starter. For 2 decades, his selection had been automatic, almost expected. For an entire generation, LeBron and the All-Star game felt inseparable. Yet this time, the league moved forward. Luka Doncic is now widely seen as the face of the Lakers, and the voting results reflected that shift. Fans, media members, and players all cast their ballots, and the outcome was decisive. In the final Western Conference frontcourt voting, LeBron finished tied for 9th in the media vote with just 3 votes, and 9th overall in the weighted rankings, a dramatic drop for someone who once dominated the ballot. To critics, this moment symbolizes a deeper shift. They argue that the claim of the game being harder now is the last narrative LeBron has to lean on. If today's game is truly faster and more punishing, they ask, why are careers lasting longer than ever? In earlier eras, players often broke down by their early 30s after years of heavy minutes and constant physical contact. Today, advances in sports science, load management, and recovery technology help extend careers significantly. While this is widely accepted, critics counter that modern longevity actually reflects a more controlled and less punishing environment. Whether fair or not, that argument continues to gain traction. Shaq seemed to sense this shift immediately. When the Inside the NBA crew selected their All-Star reserves on January 20th, he left LeBron off his list without hesitation or visible conflict. To many observers, it felt like another signal that the league's perception of LeBron's place in the hierarchy is changing in real time.
A few players that's only been slowed down because of their age. I don't want to see the king coming off the bench.
So you don't even want to see him at the game at all?
No.
Shaq then remarked, "LeBron can take my spot." On the surface, it might have sounded generous, but the tone was anything but complimentary. It didn't come across as praise, it came across as a pointed message. Shaq was signaling that the king no longer receives automatic special treatment, no matter his status or legacy. Adding fuel to the conversation, Charles Barkley weighed in and amplified the noise. Chuck openly suggested that LeBron might be nearing the end of his time in Los Angeles and even predicted a possible retirement tour back in Cleveland, further stirring debate about the future of one of the league's biggest stars.
Well, there's one thing I'm sure of. This is last year with the Lakers. He's not going to play with the Lakers next year. I've always said I'd like to see him finish in Cleveland. I'm not opposed to him getting traded to Cleveland this year.
That comment alone sent social media into a frenzy. Suddenly, the timing of that podcast began to look calculated, dropping a big MJ versus LeBron debate, shifting the focus to legacy, and controlling the headlines just before the All-Star results became the main story. Once the rankings were revealed, the conversation shifted rapidly, leaving LeBron under intense scrutiny. What made it even more significant was that some Lakers legends were not rushing to defend him. In a September 2025 interview, Magic Johnson chose Michael Jordan as the greatest, emphasizing dominance over mere longevity. This stance reinforced the idea that legacy is measured not just by how long a player lasts, but by the fear, impact, and authority they exerted on the court.
That's what make him a bad boy and the best that's ever done it. Don't get it twisted. I love LeBron, but
Magic Johnson made it clear. Staying in the league for a long time is impressive, but it is not the same as ruling it with fear. For Shaq, wearing the Lakers jersey carries far deeper meaning than brand value or media attention. It represents power, impact, and the ability to make opponents uncomfortable before the tip even occurs. So when LeBron talks about pace and evolution, the old guard hears something entirely different. They hear a shift away from intimidation, and in their world, once the fear factor fades, the crown starts to slip. For Shaq, being a Laker is not just a job, it is a religion. He was the centerpiece of the last Lakers team to dominate the league from 2000 to 2002, and he remembers exactly what it took to win those banners. Victory was not about pace and space or podcast appearances. It was 48 straight minutes of war against teams like the Spurs and Kings, teams designed to slow him down. Every possession involved contact, every drive was a collision, and elite big men battled him for position, forcing him to earn every bucket. That was the cost of dominance in that era. So when LeBron suggests today's game is harder because it moves faster, Shaq doesn't hear analysis. He hears disrespect for the grind that built those championships. It's not just Shaq feeling this way. On January 28, 2026, five-time champion Ron Harper, who played against both the Jordan Bulls and the Kobe Lakers, reacted to LeBron comparing calf strains to high ankle sprains with a single post on X. These excuses is stupid. Harper, 62, still carries the tough-minded presence of a bygone era. He has openly discussed starting deep into his 30s, guarding top players nightly without advanced recovery technology or million-dollar body programs. To veterans like him, LeBron's comments sound less like perspective and more like rewriting history to justify longevity. In Los Angeles, that perception hits hard. Fans who grew up watching Magic, the Showtime Lakers, and Shaq's dominance crave intensity, urgency, and banners, not discussions about soft tissue injuries. Critics say LeBron seems more focused on shaping narratives than fixing the Lakers' defensive issues. The contradiction is striking. 4 years, LeBron praised legends, studied their games, and positioned himself as the ultimate student of basketball history. But when the GOAT debate arises, the tone shifts. Suddenly, earlier eras are painted as slower, less skilled, and easier to dominate. This is the tension. You cannot claim greatness based on longevity while also arguing that today's league is tougher than the eras of the icons who came before. If modern basketball truly protects players more and extends careers, critics will point it out. If it is supposedly harder, they will ask why careers are lasting longer. Either way, the spotlight is intense. The 2026 All-Star snub added fuel to the fire. For the first time in over 2 decades, LeBron was not a starter. A symbolic moment to some and a clear signal to others that the league is moving on. At this stage, the debate is not just about stats. It's about respect, fear factor, and whether dominance is measured by numbers or presence. Shaq and many former players have made their stance clear. They value the edge, the intimidation, and the nightly battle scars. LeBron still holds his scoring records, his rings, and one of the greatest resumes in basketball history. But in the eyes of certain legends, something intangible is missing, and that is where this clash lives. Now it's your turn. Are you riding with the 90s enforcers and the old-school mindset? Or are you backing the evolution of the modern game and the podcast-era superstar? Drop your take in the comments. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who loves talking hoops. I'll catch you on the next one.